Marcus Ellison woke up at 5 in the morning, the way he had every day for the past 3 years. Not because an alarm told him to, but because his mind never really rested anymore. It was always working, always turning something over, always finding the next problem to solve before the sun came up. He lay still for a moment in the dark and listened. Down the hall, his 7-year-old daughter Amara was still sleeping. He could hear the soft sound of her breathing through the thin walls of their apartment. That sound was everything to him. It was the reason he got up. It was the reason he kept going. He made coffee in a small kitchen that had seen better days. The countertop had a crack running along one side. The refrigerator hummed too loudly. A drawing Amara had made the week before was stuck to the front of it with a magnet, a picture of Marcus sitting at his laptop, with the words, "My daddy is building something big," written in her round, careful handwriting. He looked at it every morning. It never stopped meaning something to him. Marcus sat down at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. The table was old and slightly uneven. He had put a folded piece of cardboard under one leg to keep it steady. On the screen was the software he had been building for over a year, a logistics platform called Loopstack. It was designed to help freight and shipping companies track their orders, fix errors in real time, and reduce the kind of costly mistakes that wasted hours and money. The idea had come to him when he was still working as a contract IT consultant, fixing problems for companies that should have had better systems in the first place. He had thought to himself, more than once, I could build something better than this. So he did. Night by night, hour by hour, while Amara slept and the city went quiet outside. He was not a man with a big office or a team behind him. He did not have investors or business cards with impressive titles. What he had was knowledge, patience, and a second-hand laptop that sometimes overheated and had to be cooled down with a small fan he bought for $4 at a second-hand shop. But Loopstack worked. He had tested it with a freight company in Ohio, a mid-sized operation that was losing thousands of dollars every month because of shipping errors. After 3 months of using his platform, their error rate dropped by 31%. The owner of the company had shaken Marcus's hand and told him it was the best decision he had ever made. That moment meant more to Marcus than any amount of money. That morning, he had somewhere important to be. He had spent the last several weeks preparing a business proposal. He had put it together carefully, checking every number, every projection, every word. He had an appointment at 9 o'clock at the offices of Vantage Capital Group, one of the most well-known investment firms in the city. Getting that appointment had taken months of emails, follow-up calls, and one very firm letter that he had rewritten 11 times before sending. He dressed in his best suit. It was a dark navy blue, a little outdated, and the jacket was slightly tight across the shoulders because he had bought it 4 years ago when he was a few pounds lighter. But it was clean and pressed, and he wore it with quiet pride. When Amara woke up, she came padding into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She saw him dressed up and immediately became serious in the way that only small children can, like the moment called for her full attention. "Are you going to get money for Loopstack today?" she asked. "I'm going to try," Marcus said. She nodded slowly, thinking about this. Then she walked over to him, reached up, and began fixing his tie. She had seen him do it before and was convinced she knew how. When she stepped back and looked at her work, the tie was crooked to the left. She seemed satisfied. Marcus looked down at it. He left it exactly as she fixed it. He kissed the top of her head, made sure her breakfast was on the table, and called their neighbor Mrs. Okafor to come and stay with her until school. Then he walked out into the gray Tuesday morning with a USB drive in his pocket and 14 months of work under his arm. Vantage Capital Group was housed in a tall glass building in the center of downtown. Marcus had passed it before but never gone inside through the front door. His previous visits to buildings like this one had always been through a side entrance, carrying a laptop bag and a toolkit, called in to fix someone else's system. Today he walked through the main entrance. He gave his name to the receptionist, signed in, and was taken upstairs. The boardroom on the 34th floor was exactly what he expected. Glass walls, long table, black leather chairs, and a view of the city that probably cost more than his apartment building. 6 people sat around the table when he walked in. Some were looking at their phones. One was reading papers. None of them looked up right away. At the head of the table sat Diana Caldwell. She was 51 years old and had built Vantage Capital into one of the most respected firms in the region. She was sharp, quick, and known for making decisions in minutes. People in the business world spoke about her with either admiration or fear, depending on which side of a meeting they had been on. She had a short silver haircut, a dark blazer, and the kind of posture that told you she had never in her life slouched. She looked at Marcus when he came in. Not unkindly, but not warmly either. She looked at him the way someone looks at a form they have to fill out, noticing it, getting ready to deal with it, and already thinking about what came next. Marcus was given 3 minutes. He stood at one end of the table and began to speak. He kept his voice steady. He explained what Loopstack did, how it worked, what results it had already produced. He pulled up one slide on the screen, clean, simple, showing the numbers from his Ohio client. He was clear. He was confident. He did not rush. He was 2 minutes in when Diana raised one hand. He stopped. She spoke without looking at the screen. We don't fund single product companies with no institutional backing. You're a solo operator. That's a risk profile we don't take on at this stage. She did not raise her voice. She did not say it cruelly. She said it the way you state a fact about the weather. Someone near the door stood up and opened it. The meeting was over. Marcus stood still for exactly 3 seconds. He looked at Diana. Then he looked at the open door. Then he picked up his USB drive from the table, closed his folder, and said, "Thank you for your time." He meant it. There was no bitterness in his voice, no embarrassment on his face. He nodded once and walked out. The door closed behind him. Inside the boardroom, the meeting moved on before he had reached the elevator. In the lobby of the building, Marcus sat down on a bench near the security desk. A few people walked past him, professionals in suits, someone carrying a box of files, a security guard making his slow rounds. Nobody paid him any attention. He took out his phone. He opened a message thread with a man named Raymond Goss. Raymond was 63 years old, semi-retired, and was the largest private investor in Vantage Capital Group. He had made his money in manufacturing 20 years ago and had spent the years since then investing carefully and quietly. He had a reputation for being practical and for trusting his instincts about people above everything else. Marcus had not met Raymond through any business event or networking group. He had met him 8 months earlier in a hospital waiting room. Marcus had been there for Amara's routine checkup. Raymond had been there with his wife. They had sat next to each other for almost 2 hours, and somehow, the way things sometimes happen in waiting rooms, they had started talking. Raymond had asked Marcus what he did. Marcus had explained Loopstack. Not in a sales way. Just honestly, the way you talk to a stranger when you have nothing to prove. Raymond had listened. He had asked a few questions. Not investor questions, just curious ones, the kind a man asks when he is genuinely interested. They had exchanged numbers. Over the following months, they had spoken a handful of times. Raymond had eventually asked to see the platform. Marcus showed him everything, the code, the results, the plans, the problems. Raymond had sat quietly for a long time after that and then said, "This is real work." In the weeks before the Vantage Capital meeting, Marcus and Raymond had been in quiet negotiations. Raymond had grown increasingly unhappy with the direction Vantage Capital was taking, chasing trends, overlooking steady builders, valuing speed over substance. He had been looking for a reason to redirect his investment. Marcus, without knowing it at first, had become that reason. Marcus had told Raymond about the appointment at Vantage Capital. Raymond had said, "Go. Let them have their answer. Then we move." So now Marcus sat in the lobby on that bench and typed a message, "Just left. We're ready when you are." The reply came in less than 60 seconds, "Sign the term sheet. I'll wire the transfer." Marcus read the message twice. He exhaled slowly. He put his phone in his pocket and sat quietly for a moment, looking at the floor of the lobby, marble, polished, reflecting the light from above. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the building. The paperwork was completed in a lawyer's office 12 blocks away, where Marcus had already sat down with Raymond's legal team earlier that week to go through every page. It took 53 minutes from the moment he walked out of the boardroom to the moment the final document was signed. Raymond Goss withdrew his investment from Vantage Capital Group. It was the largest single investor exit the firm had ever experienced. That money, all of it, moved directly into Loopstack, making Raymond the lead backer at a company valuation of $14.2 million. Marcus retained majority ownership. He was, in that moment, no longer a solo operator with a laptop on a kitchen table. He was the founder and majority stakeholder of a company that was now real on paper, in law, and in fact. He did not celebrate loudly. He did not go out for a fancy dinner or buy himself anything expensive. He drove back across the city, picked Amara up from school at 3:15 in the afternoon the way he did every single day, and took her to get ice cream. She chose strawberry. He chose the same. She asked him how his day went. He told her it went well. She asked if he got the money. He said yes. She thought about this for a moment, licking her ice cream, and then said, "I knew it because of your tie." He laughed. It was the best laugh he had had in months. Diana Caldwell found out through her chief financial officer, who found out through a financial alert that landed in his inbox at 4:47 that same afternoon. He walked into her office and placed the document on her desk without saying a word. She read it once. She read it again. She sat back in her chair. She did not call Marcus. She did not send a message through anyone. She was not the kind of person who made excuses, and she was not the kind of person who chased what she had already let go. But that evening, alone in her office after everyone had gone home, she pulled up the proposal file that Marcus had left behind, the same presentation she had dismissed in under 2 minutes, and she read it from beginning to end. Every slide. Every number. Every footnote. When she finished, she closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. She was not angry at Marcus. She understood exactly what had happened. She had looked at a man in an outdated suit with a crooked tie and made a decision based on what she saw in front of her rather than what was actually on the table. It was a mistake. She had not made many of them in her career, and she did not intend to make this kind of one again. Over the next 8 months, Loopstack grew steadily and quietly. Marcus hired his first employee, a woman named Priya who he had met in a community coding class 3 years earlier when both of them were still trying to figure out how to build the things in their heads. She was talented and patient and believed in the platform completely. Then he hired 2 more. Then 5. Then 9. By the end of the year, Loopstack was being used by freight operations in 4 states. 2 mid-sized logistics companies had signed 12-month contracts. A larger company was in talks. The numbers were moving in the right direction every single week. Marcus moved his office out of the kitchen. He rented a small space on the 2nd floor of a building not far from Amara's school. He kept the furniture simple. On his desk, in a small frame, was the drawing Amara had made, the one with him at the laptop and the words, "My daddy is building something big." He still picked her up at 3:15 every day. Raymond Goss was interviewed some months later by a business journal that was covering a story about smart early-stage investments. The journalist asked him what had made him believe in Loopstack when no major firm had backed it. Raymond thought about the question for a moment. Then he said, "I didn't invest in the software first. I invested in the men who built it." He came to that building ready to be told no. Most people, when they're told no, either fall apart or get angry. Marcus walked out of that room like he already knew what the next step was. "That told me everything." The journalist asked if he had known about the Vantage Capital meeting before it happened. Raymond smiled and said, "I knew. I suggested he go." The journalist looked surprised. "Why?" "Because a man should know which rooms are not meant for him," Raymond said. "And he should be comfortable enough in himself to walk out of one and into a better one without losing a single step." Marcus never spoke publicly about that Tuesday morning on the 34th floor. He did not post about it. He did not give interviews about it. He did not need to. The version of himself that had walked into that boardroom with a crooked tie and a USB drive and 14 months of quiet work, that man had already known something the people around the table did not. He had known that the meeting was not the moment. The moment was already set. It was already moving. It was already 53 minutes away. He had simply needed to walk through one room to get to the next one. Amara, now 8 years old, sometimes asked him to tell her the story of the day the plan worked. He always told it the same way, with the same ending. And she always asked the same final question. Were you scared, Daddy? He always paused before answering because he wanted to be honest. A little, he would say. But I kept going anyway. She would nod, satisfied with this, the way children are satisfied when an answer makes complete sense to them. And it did make sense. Because that, more than the money or the platform or the valuation or any of it, was the truest thing about Marcus Ellison. He was afraid sometimes. He kept going anyway. And in the end, that made all the difference.